Hello everyone, this is third part of my lecture on propaganda model. In my last video, I was talking about, excuse me, all right, yeah, this is where I have to begin. In my last video, I was talking about first filter of propaganda model, which was the filter of ownership. Now let's talk about second filter, which is advertising. We all know that media organizations, they mostly generate their revenue from advertising. Like uh, a major chunk of their income comes from advertising. So advertisers many times have the power to affect decisions of media persons. That is how the information that gets to us, it goes through the filter of advertisers. See, almost all media organizations are heavily dependent on advertisers for their revenue. Advertisers' choices influence media prosperity and media survival. Of course, no advertising for newspapers mean no income, and their decisions, of course, then may be affected by advertisers or whatever advertisers tell them. This was the second filter. Third filter, let's talk about third filter. Third filter is source. Source is, of course, the beginning point of something. Whatever information that comes to us, it comes from a source. Those almost all of you may have taken the course of MCOM 101 and other core courses, and you know the word beat, BEAT, which is an area assigned to a reporter or a journalist or a media person. So we know that when we talk about beats, many journalists have beats of uh, parliament, a provincial assembly, and similarly municipal corporation offices, educational institutions, and all that. See, these are sources, these places are sources. The book that I am going to share with you for the example of propaganda model, I mean for the notes of propaganda model, in the discussion of this third filter, the writers have said that sources of information for US newspapers, of course, are Pentagon, they are um, uh, Congress, they are White House, which is, of course, where the president of the US lives. So these places are sources. And the journalists have their connections with people who work in Pentagon, with people who work in White House, people who work in Congress or whatever. And because these are the places from where raw material is coming from journalists. They receive they go there, they attend press conferences, they get press briefings, and then they bring all this information for their channels that later can be published or broadcast. Now you see, when they have links there, sometimes I mean, people in Congress, Pentagon, of course, they are powerful, and they can use threats, they can use personal relationships, or sometimes bribery, or even rewards to convince journalists not to publish an information or to do some sort of propaganda against a person or an institution or that kind of thing. So that is what Herman and Chomsky mean by the filter of source, which means, of course, journalists do not produce reports or produce information. They actually gather information from different sources, and sometimes those sources can affect journalists. And journalists, of course, if they have close connections with people who are in Pentagon or who are in White House, they do not want to offend them. Journalists would uh, try to abide by what their sources tell them. So that is how sometimes sources can also affect information that gets to us, or sometimes some sort of propaganda may intervene into the information from sources that gets to us. So let's see what we have here on the screen. See, media need raw material for news, and they get this raw material from sources that I just discussed. The powerful can use threats, they can use personal relationships or rewards or bribery to influence or coerce media. Coerce is to to pressurize someone, to force someone to do things. In Pakistan, of course, sources for journalists for important information, especially the information that comes from government body, is provincial assembly, uh, parliamentary proceedings, parliament, judicial institutions, and all that. See, media may feel obligated to carry dubious news stories, or to stop criticism in order not to offend their sources. So this is what Harman and Chomsky mean by the third filter of information. I'm going to stop the recording of my lecture here, and you can see the rest of the lecture in our virtual session that we will do I'll actually give a detail. I'll talk about 2 more filters in my virtual during our virtual meeting on coming Tuesday. Thank you.